Each summer we would spend a couple of weeks at Grandpa Crowley's house in Daviston. Now Daviston was a lot smaller than Camp Hill, and they had no swimming pool. And the main attraction in Daviston was going to the store. Downtown there was only one store. It was called Junior's Store. Junior happened to be one of my relatives, and so we would go there and buy .22 caliber bullets for our rifles and gum and candy and such as that. But since there was no swimming pool, you just had to find things to do. And if you did want to go swimming, you had to go to a place called the Mill Creek. And I always nagged and bugged Mom and Dad to take me to the Mill Creek because I really, really, really liked it. But we didn't go very often. The Mill Creek was called Mill Creek because, well, there used to be a mill there, but the mill was gone, and the only thing left was the creek. And it was in a rocky area where the rocks were high on one side and the water trickled over the rocks and went down to a pond down below. Now the local Baptist church used to hold baptism services in the pond down below. Now that's where my folks went to church in Daviston, and so did my grandpa. They went to the Daviston Baptist Church. And the sloping rocks down there was a channel maybe, this wide, and the water went all around, but some of the water flew through this channel in the rocks, and it was like a big slide, and so you could get out of the pond and walk up and climb up the rocks, and it was a gentle, easy slope. It wasn't anything steep, and they were all pretty smooth. They weren't jagged rocks, and so you'd climb up there, then you could sit down in that channel and you could go whee, right, and sploosh into the pond and get out and go back up, whee, sploosh into the pond. And I used to love to do that when I was a kid, but there was one problem with going to the pond. Number one is there were cows all around. It was in somebody's field, and so some days you had to share the pond with the cows, and you know what cows do in the pond. Well, we won't talk about that. But what happened in the pond, there were leeches, and it didn't matter when you went there were always leeches. Now sometimes there'd be a lot of them, sometimes there'd be just a few, and I don't know what the criteria was for the leeches being few or many, but on days when there were a lot of them, you would get out of the pond and there'd be these little black leeches about an inch long stuck on your body here and there. You'd always get out of the pond and you'd check under your arms, you'd check between your toes, and you'd check behind your ears and look for leeches, and they'd be attached to you, and you could pick them off, and they would, when you picked them off, it would leave a tiny little spot of blood. And as kids, we didn't mind too much because we wanted to swim really bad, but it kind of grossed out my mom and dad. They didn't like us to get the leeches. Nevertheless, they took us swimming because we wanted to go swimming really bad, and sometimes they would go swimming there too. And then they'd have to pick off the leeches just like we did. And that was one of the advantages of living and visiting Grandma in Camp Hill, is you could go to the swimming pool. The swimming pool didn't have leeches. It had green algae at the bottom on certain days, but no leeches, so it was a nicer place to swim. But that was one of the things we did in Daviston to have fun. We would go to the mill pond and go swimming.